Hi, I'm Sarah Cowgill, along with Andrew Moran, Tim Donner, Scott Cosenza, and Graham Noble, and this is the Conservative Five, an online TV production of Liberty Nation News. Pope, as they say in the Midwest, we got us a pope. After the white smoke cleared, a good old Midwestern guy emerged as the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. Robert Francis Prevost, now Leo XIV, is the 267th Pope. He's the first from the United States. He's also an Augustinian, and only the second from the Western Hemisphere. The Pope is a member of the Order of St. Augustine, founded in 1244, dedicated to the teachings of St. Augustine, which makes sense, of Hippo, and known for communal living, poverty, and service to others. Sounds like a gas. But he brings politics alive too, so let's get at it, Graham. You have 2 minutes. Let's talk about this Pope.
Well, you picked probably exactly the wrong person for this job, because being born into a Scottish Protestant family, I have an ancestral I do not see eye to eye with the Vatican, let's say. Political leaders should keep out of religious affairs, and religious leaders should keep out of political affairs. And I believe that the founding fathers believed that as well. Of course, when has it ever happened? The Vatican, since its inception, has been involved in, international politics, geopolitics, if you like. They've always been, but generally speaking, historically, popes have not gotten into the Vatican's always had what I consider to be a rather kind of clever policy, if you like, of it is kind of subtly thrown its weight behind certain world powers in certain international conflicts throughout the history of the world without actually delving into the nitty-gritty of political ideology. And I think the last Pope really kind of went a little over the top with that, perhaps, in my opinion. The left in this country, or if you like, the anti-Trumpers here in America, are already kind of hoping that somehow this Pope is going to be, they're almost going to use him against Trump, or that he himself is going to be kind of an anti-Trump Pope. I think they're going to be disappointed. I mean, I have a feeling that this Pope is likely to stick to Catholic doctrine, not necessarily strictly, but more strictly than the last guy. I think the people in the left media over here who are already kind of saying that he's going to be a quote unquote bulwark against Trump are going to be disappointed. I don't think he is. I think he's probably going to stay out of American politics less than the last guy. But it's kind of interesting. I was going to go into a whole thing about. I was reading a survey the other day, which is fascinating. American Catholics are actually veering drastically away from traditional Catholic doctrine in many areas, such as same-sex marriage, and should deacons be allowed to get? Are they called deacons? I don't know, but anyway, those mid-level, I think, Catholic officials or whatever, that they should be allowed to get married and all this kind of thing. So, I don't know if that's happening all over the world, but certainly in the States, Catholicism's hold over the devoted of the Catholic Church is kind of weakening. And I think perhaps this Pope, far be it from me to give him any advice, but I think this Pope might want to concentrate more on the popularity of Catholic doctrine rather than get involved in, what Trump is doing.
In my neck of the woods, nobody was really debating, if this is the best guy for the Catholic religion. They want to know if, he's a Chicago Cubs fan or a White Sox fan. And there's a lot of discussion on that. But, besides MLB wise, Scott, is this a good guy? Is this a good Catholic? Is this a good person to take over this order?
Oh, I'll leave that to the Almighty to decide if he's a good guy or a good person.
You don't want to go up against the good Lord?
I would say that to comment on what Graham has said, from the conservative Catholic perspective, and I say this as a cultural Catholic myself. The reason why the faithful or the members of the church don't adhere to those principles is because they've been dropped by the leadership, and it has been the decimation of the church has been at the hands of the leadership, who have acted in ways to contravene its very doctrine. And that's what they are calling out for and crying out for, as an actual Catholic leader of the Catholic Church, who will say without apology, yes, we can say that without hating any gay person or thinking they're particularly evil or anything, that's not it's not okay if you're going to be a Catholic to engage in same-sex marriage. And we don't have that. We haven't had that. And one of the things that for people who aren't Catholic, who maybe don't know, they can track the level of conservatism in the Pope is the celebration of the Latin Mass. The very conservative Catholics like to celebrate Mass in Latin, or hear Mass spoken in Latin. Before Vatican II conference, Latin was the quote-unquote universal language of the church, and people who were Catholic who lived in Guatemala could go to Mass in Germany or the United States to a Catholic Mass and all speak the same language. And then with this kind of popularization of the faith for, the every person, and that's dilution of the faith for some folks, we've got the local languages. But the previous Pope actually denied Catholics the ability to hear, it's very, it's a dictatorial top-down thing. So if the Pope says no go, it's not like the local churches can do what they want. And so that's kind of a bellwether, I think, that we can look at to see just how tolerant this Pope will be of a more conservative Catholicism. And as far as baseball is concerned, maybe we have an answer with Pete Rose has now been declared eligible for reintroduction into baseball posthumously. So maybe we'll see him in the Hall of Fame. And the Pope did spend some time in Philly in college, and so maybe he has an appreciation for the Phillies, and we can call that an answered prayer.
That's doubtful. Very doubtful.
Oh yeah, no, he's a Chicago guy. It's just which Chicago team? Come on, you can't be any more Chicago than that. Tim, abortion, divorce, sexuality issues. We've touched on those. Does Leo line up conservative, or is he a little more open to watching the church change for the better or for the worst?
Well, first to the most important matter, which is baseball. There's no doubt which team he's a fan of. He's been a White Sox fan his whole life. In fact, they plucked a picture of him in White Sox regalia during the 2005 World Series, which was won by the White Sox against Houston. So, those Cub fans that are hoping that he's somehow a Cubs fan. In fact, if you're a White Sox fan, you cannot like the Cubs, just like if you're a Mets fan, you cannot like the Yankees. Or
unless you're Hillary Clinton, where you can change at will.
Or, yes, that's true. Very good, Scott. Or, like Andrew, if you're a Red Sox fan, you cannot be a Yankees fan. But, Graham said that he thinks that the Pope, the new Pope, the first American Pope, which is a momentous thing, will stay out of American politics. And that may be true going forward. But if you look at his social media posts over the past few years, specifically since Donald Trump came to office, it's quite obvious that he is no fan of Donald Trump. In fact, he has retweeted or re-axed, I guess it's called now, several anti-Trump screeds. So he may not say anything and probably won't agree with Graham. He's probably not going to weigh in anymore, but he's already on the record. And so I think putting that in context, you would say, well, maybe he's also more of a liberal on balance. But the record doesn't really show that when it comes to social issues. He has consistently opposed abortion. He has not fully endorsed or opposed the blessing of same-sex unions. But he's also suggested through his comments, though not explicitly, that he is not a fan of LGBTQ plus special rights or recognition. He has expressed concerns about the promotion of gender ideology. He's been a vocal opponent, as I said, of abortion, and at some point referred to it as a form of murder, which is a very consistent Catholic doctrine. He has views on divorce, which of course is prohibited in the Catholic Church, and has led to the absurd situation often where somebody who's been married for years has that marriage annulled as if it never took place.
Right.
And effectively, it's a divorce. The Church's stance on marriage and divorce is very much written in stone. And yet, at the same time, the Catholic Church includes people like Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, who are openly pro-choice or pro-abortion rights, even though Catholicism being a top-down religion, there's no room for people to dispute, unlike in the Protestant denominations, which are very varied in their beliefs. The Catholic Church is not, and yet many people continue to call themselves Catholics who are not faithful to Catholic doctrine.
It's like party identity in the United States. People call themselves a Republican or a Democrat, but they don't be any kind of a thing. There's no excommunication from the church for espousing, for being Nancy Pelosi. By the way, that annulment thing is very interesting. That was a money grab, by the way. So what happened was all these Catholics, when the divorce waves came in after the 60s and liberalization of divorce laws in the United States, it used to be that the Pope himself had to sign your annulment. That's how rare it was in the Catholic Church to get an annulment. The Pope himself had to sign it. But now, if you pay a significant sum of money, that's how you get your annulment. You pay a money. And then, by the way, the party that you're married to, if they want to challenge the annulment, they have to pay to have it challenged, to have their objection to having their marriage annulled. So
that's exciting.
Well, Ted Kennedy, Ted Kennedy was married to his wife for like over 20 years.
Yeah.
And they had the marriage annulled as if it didn't happen, even though they had multiple children during the marriage. And those are before the days when people often, as now, have children without ever getting married.
Sure.
Well, Spencer Tracy, he was a Catholic, and his wife was a Catholic, and he had a long affair with Katharine Hepburn, and he never divorced his wife. He just, he gave her money, let her live in the house, and all that stuff, but he just never divorced her and just kept kissing and smooching Katharine Hepburn.
Okay, so we've gone down a weird track.
Thank you for that reference point, Andy. I'm sure we all appreciate it.
Here's what I want to know. I mean, this is such a big deal. The pomp, the circumstances, the smoke, the this, the that, blah, 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 blah. And
hold on just a second, Sarah. For all our Catholic viewers, that might be just a little disrespectful.
No, I'm not done yet. Stop interrupting me. I'm not done yet. What I'm saying is, for this religion to have such a high place in everything culturally, what I want to know is, I mean, they're not even the top spot. Catholics aren't the top religion in the world. Andrew, Christians, Jews, Islam, what's your big religion, and why is all of this so important when we don't see that coming from any of the other, ideology?
I'll answer that question. I just want with all the things you were discussing, it reminded me of a clip of a scene from Hannah and Her Sisters when Woody Allen's trying to find a religion, and he chooses Catholicism, and he says, "I want to become a Catholic, specifically the anti-nuclear, pro-abortion, same-sex wing of the Catholic faith." So they're this conversation. All right, so it's funny to ask this question. I saw a clip recently of Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire, and I think he was on Piers Morgan, and he said that Pope Francis was one of the greatest was probably the most terrific modern pope because of how many people joined the Catholic faith. But in the United States alone, according to Pew Research data, this is from from 2009 to 2024, when Pope Francis climbed to the throne in 2013, 21% of U.S. adults were Catholics. At the end of last year, that number actually fell to 20% of people identifying as Catholic. So I've seen all these reports of how many young people are joining the Catholic faith and they want to become Catholics and they want some sort of structure in their lives. But now, how does it compare to other religions? If you again, this is a separate Pew Research report, and it found that 62% of Americans identify as Christians, 2% are Jewish, and 1% are Muslims. Now, within that report, I do find something interesting. It's maybe Scott will appreciate this. It said that 83% believe in God, and 70% of Americans believe in heaven, hell, or both. Now, this might have some nuance, but as everyone's read Jean-Paul Sartre, and he said in that famous play, No Exit, hell is other people. And so those are the numbers from was interested in the economics of religion.
I think without getting into a big theological discussion, we have to remember that when you're talking about, Catholicism is a religion. When you're talking about Islam and Christianity and Judaism, they are faiths. And it's kind of slightly different because a faith has different religions within it, like Islam, Christianity, Judaism. They're all split into different, what you might call religions. But, to answer your question about what is the big deal with Catholicism, and sorry, Scott, I don't mean that disrespectfully. I'm just kind of borrowing from Jerry Seinfeld there. What's the big deal with Catholicism? But the big deal about Catholicism is that to a certain extent, the Catholic Church, the Vatican, has shaped history to a very large extent in terms of both here in Europe, not so much maybe in North America, but certainly in Europe, in South America, and in the Middle East. The Catholic Church, you can't talk about the history of any of those regions without talking about the involvement of the Catholic Church. So,
well, the Cold War, by the way, if you want to include that, I mean, that certainly affected us. So the church was very much instrumental in bringing about the end of the Cold War.
Well, I will say this, the Vatican Council, the conclave, was faithful to the idea of, the Catholic tradition of helping the poor, because by naming Pope Leo, they actually helped the poorest team in the history of Major League Baseball. The White Sox lost an all-time record 121 games in the 2024 season. So they certainly have reached out and provided alms for the poor in the form of the White Sox and their fans.
Well, the Rockies will...
I know I will be watching Cubs baseball to see if they get closer to the pennant and, be on the lookout for the Pope Mobile at Wrigley Field. I am not
going to happen.
And I'm not 100% certain that he's not going to be skulking around looking for, I don't know.
Actually, Wrigley's Field, according to Barack Obama, I would have you know.
Oh, that's great. Well, of course, Barack Obama was famously a White Sox fan as well.
All right. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for talking Pope with us today. And we'll see you in the next go around. It's kind of getting kind of fun out there in political land. Thanks. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform, YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, or on them all. As well, Liberty Nation News has its own Roku channel, where you can see all of our TV productions. Now, Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. I'm your host, Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us today for the latest news and commentary. Your choice for free thinking, free speech, libertynation.com.